Our town, our TV. Amherst City Cable.
April 28th regular meeting of Amherst City Council will come to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bukovac.
Here.
Mr. Goodell.
Here.
Mr. Van Churen.
Here.
Mrs. Wasilk.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Janik.
Here.
Anyone like to introduce himself?
I move that we excuse Mr. Ramsey. He has a letter on file.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second on the floor to excuse Mr. Ramsey from tonight's meeting. He has a letter on file. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Mr. Ramsey is excused. We'll stand for the pledge of prayer by Chaplain Silk and the pledge of flag by Sergeant at Arms Bukovac.
Will you bow with me, please? Gracious God, bless this meeting tonight. Bless all who are assembled here, and bless their words and thoughts. Keep the path of righteousness always in their minds, and now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the executive session held April 14th, 2014. Minutes of the regular council meeting held April 14th, 2014. Minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held April 21st, 2014. Minutes of the Building and Lands Committee meeting held April 21st, 2014.
Mr. Janik.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Consent agenda is accepted. Move on to item 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on tonight's agenda. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item that is on tonight's agenda? Not. We'll move on to item 6, ordinances and resolutions, first reading. Item A.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to solicit bids for the 2014 Street Rehabilitation Program and authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to award the contract for such work to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract for professional services with Brown Hall Engineering and Surveying Company relating to such program and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bukovac.
I'd like to suspend council rules so that item 6A may be passed on its first reading, please.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item A, so may be passed on the first reading. Are there any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Winarski.
I'd like to move to adopt.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It'll be ordinance 014-15.
Item B.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract to purchase a 2015 2 1/2 ton dump truck for the street department through the State Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract to purchase certain additional equipment for the truck.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to suspend council rules to item 6B, maybe pass that first reading.
Mr. Goodell. Second. Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item B, so may be passed on the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Janik.
Move to adopt?
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Churen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It'll be ordinance O-14-16.
Thank you. Item C,
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement with the Lorraine County Port Authority's Land Bank Program through the Lorraine County Land Reutilization Corporation for the abatement of blighted and abandoned properties in the city of Amherst.
Mr. Winarski.
I would like to ask that this be moved to the next meeting for its second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Van Kuren?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to move item C onto the second reading. Are there any comments? Mr. Winarski.
Just some comment, when this was introduced in committee, there was some conversation about what it costs Amherst. At this time, I can share with you that the schools are contributing $30,000 a year to make this program work. Will our participation increase that amount? I don't know yet. I spoke with the treasurer tonight at the school board meeting. She's still waiting to hear back from the county auditor. I've got to call into him also. So with that, I'd like to have this once again go to the next reading with some information pending.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Buckerback.
Thank you. I'd ask Councilman Winarski, it is still a fact that the impact on the schools will still be there even if we do not go into this agreement, correct?
No, actually, that's not 100%. There'll always be a contribution. It's just the amount of the contribution. It's at $30,000 now. But the question is, will we have to contribute $30,000? Will it go up, or is it self-sustaining? We don't know that yet. We're waiting to hear from the county auditor. There'll always be a contribution. It's just how much that amount will be. I don't know.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Ms. Donahue, given you the information from past, what's the pattern of contribution for the last few times this grant has been up? Have we contributed $30,000 each year?
Has been, the treasurer shared with me that the numbers she has, it says it's $30,000 a year.
A year, so that, and she's going off of the last
Yes,
few
sir.
years. So she expects 30 grand again, and we won't know until the auditor gets
She
back.
wouldn't commit to a number until she talks to the auditor.
Okay, thank you,
All
I
right.
appreciate your efforts on that.
Mayor Taylor.
Yes, the city share on that was about $1,600, so the school paid $30,000, the city contributed, they take it up front, we never see it, so they take it right from our taxes up front. So our first share was around $6,800 from the city, $30,000 from the schools.
You're gonna call for that next week. No, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
But you're saying it's been taken out for the last several years?
No, they've only done
No,
this
no, I mean,
once.
you're saying that the treasurer says it's been taken out for the last several years.
Since they've begun the program, their contribution is $30,000 a year. No, I
And we have
can't.
not taken 1 cent of that.
That's
It's
right.
gone to
That's
other
why we're doing the
cities.
program.
And it's not going to change from the
I don't know
30,000.
that.
Well, apparently, it's $30,000 for the last several years, and this city has not gotten any of that. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. We've only paid it once.
No,
It was
this-
$30,000 for the schools, $6,800 from the city. I only know that it'd be taken from us on one occasion. I don't know whether it'll be any more or any less in the future.
but according to Mr. Winarski, though, the schools have had $30,000 taken out for the last several years, and we apparently
I
didn't
don't know
know
what you
about it.
said the last several years.
Since the schools, yes, what's difficult, okay, there's the inception of the program and the funding of it was a combination of city and property dollars. I'm sorry, school dollars. The treasurer told me it was $30,000,
From the schools,
correct?
and it's about $6,800 from the city
Mhm.
that they've taken. And I don't know of any more or less, how many years that's been. So to
That's-
say it's gonna be that every year, we don't know that yet.
Right, but the information she had is $30,000.
That's exactly
And
right.
then we're working with the county auditor to find out if we're gonna contribute that, or continue that contribution. Is it self-sustaining at this point? Will it go up, will it go down? We don't know yet.
All we know is we wanna get in the program so we can get our money's worth. At least our $36,000 worth.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. $6,800, we make our money, at least as a city, and that's our number one responsibility, we make our money back in one home. So if we get one home in this program, we just probably on average save about $3,200. It's only $3,200, but the schools are paying into it regardless. I think the key, and I thank you, Chuck, for putting this, Mr. Winarski, putting this effort into getting this information. I would like to hear what the auditor has to say as well. If they're going to continue to pay $30,000 a year, and we have an option to pay $6,800. If we get more than one house or more, we're looking to improve our neighborhoods, improve the value of our schools because of that, and do it for $6,800. I think Mayor Taylor's correct, and this is a good deal to get our money's worth out. So if the information comes back the way I think it will, I would be in support of this, but I agree with Mr. Winarski. I'd like to see one more reading at least on this. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we have a motion second to pass item C on the second reading. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item D,
An ordinance approving and accepting changes to the collective bargaining agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Van Kuren,
Move to suspend council rules so 6E can pass on its first reading.
Mr. Bukovac.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item D so may be passed on the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Miller.
Move to adopt with comment. I just want to once again thank the administration and council president and the rest that worked on these contracts. There's a lot of time and effort. This is more than just one night's worth of work. And I'd like to say thank you for your efforts and job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Winarski.
I'd like to second.
Motion is second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance number is O-14-17.
Item E,
An ordinance to establish the salaries, terms, and other conditions of employment for the chief and lieutenants of the police department of the city of Amherst, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Goodell.
I move to suspend council rules so that item 6E may be passed on its first reading.
Mr. Janik.
Second?
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules and item E shall may be passed on the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Miller.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance is O-14-18.
Item F,
An ordinance to establish the salary, terms, and other conditions of the fire chief of the city of Amherst, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Goodell.
I move to suspend council rules so that item 6F may also be passed on its first reading.
Ms. Wasilk.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules and item F so may be passed on the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Miller.
Move to adopt, sir.
Mr. Janik.
Second?
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance O-14-19.
Item G,
An ordinance to establish the salary and benefits of the superintendents of utilities and of the Water Pollution Control Center, supervisors of the electric, sewer, street, water, and water pollution control center, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Goodell.
I move to suspend council rules so that item 6G may be passed on its first reading.
Mr. Winarski.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item G so may be passed on the first reading. Any comments or questions? Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Janik.
Move to adopt?
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance O-14-20.
Item H.
An ordinance to establish the salary and benefits of the Director of the Office on Aging of the City of Amherst, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Van Kuren.
Suspend council rules so that item H can be passed on this reading.
Mr. Bukovac.
Second, please.
Thank you. Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Janik.
Move to adopt?
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk? Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance O-14-21.
Item I.
An ordinance to establish the salaries and benefits of the deputy treasurer, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bukovac.
Make a motion to suspend council rules so that item 6I may be passed on its first reading, please.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item I so may be passed in the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren? Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Ms. Wasilk.
Move to adopt?
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
The ordinance O-14-22.
Item J.
An ordinance to establish the salary and benefits of certain full-time, non-bargaining unit employees of the City of Amherst, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Winarski.
I'd like to ask that we suspend council rules so this can be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend council rules on item J so may be passed on the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Winarski.
Move to adopt?
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to adopt. Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It's ordinance O-14-23.
And the last one, item K.
An ordinance to increase appropriations in Fund 280, declaring an emergency.
Mr. Janik.
Motion to suspend council rules so that item 6K can be read on its first, or passed on its first reading.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to suspend rules on item K so may be passed in the first reading. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries. Mr. Goodell.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Winarski.
I'd second that.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ordinance O-14-24.
Completes item 6. Move on to item 7. Ordinances and resolutions, second reading, there are none. Item 8. Ordinances and resolutions, third reading, there are none. With that, we'll move on to item 9, miscellaneous acknowledgement of the public. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item? Mr. Benowski.
2 questions, Mr. President, and I'd like to ask our Safety Service Director. Out and about this weekend, got 2 reoccurring questions with regards to potholes. If a person's finding potholes, what's the best way, how would you like them to handle that?
If you have a pothole, I would guess you just call us here at City Hall. Or if the mayor has a different suggestion. But I would say call here and talk to Jamie and we'll go look at it.
No, our policy is that we've got 48 hours by state law to fix a pothole that is in disrepair. And normally we always meet that, and because they always want us to pay for it, and we're not gonna pay for it unless it shows neglect on our part. So they
No,
call
they just want to
here.
fix
They
potholes.
call here.
You're talking about a
They-
flat tire.
Okay.
Oh, no.
You're
If
just
they
trying to
find,
fix
if they
a
find,
pothole.
because potholes are continuing to get
Okay,
big.
yeah, well, what happens is they can call here or call the street department or the utility office, and we'll put a work order through, and we'll make sure it's completed.
Okay, thank you. The second question, the street sweeping program,
It's ongoing. We go out Mondays and Fridays all the time, Monday mornings. Because of the weekends, we sweep the downtown area. The guy usually goes out, the operator, about 2 in the morning, sweeps till streets start to get busy. And then Fridays, he has a map, and we try to sweep the entire city twice a year. So he marks off what streets he swept on Friday and go to another one the next Friday.
thank you, thank you
So
very
it's
much.
ongoing.
Okay, appreciate it. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Kamakar from the Board of Education for the Amherst Schools, and Amanda and Anthony for coming up and visiting us today. He's here for his Eagle Scout badge, is that correct? And I wish you the best of luck on that. That's a heck of an endeavor, and good luck. Thanks for coming up. That's it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now we'll move on to item 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
I have one, Mr. President. It'll be Agenda A-14-30 for Finance. Authorization to bid and award the replacement of 15 kV electrical distribution lines, and that's complete.
Thank you. Finance, Ms. Vasil?
Call Finance Committee for May 5th at 7 o'clock to discuss A-14-30, authorization to bid and award the replacement of 15 kV electrical distribution lines.
Thank you. Building and lands, Mr. Benowski?
Nothing at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Streets, Mr. Bukovac?
No items, please cancel.
Thank you. Community development, Mr. Jen?
No items, please cancel.
Thank you. Executive, Mr. Goodell?
Nothing at this time, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Ordinance, Mr. Miller?
No items, please cancel, Mr. President.
Thank you. Utilities, Mr. Miller?
No items, please cancel.
Thank you. Recycle, Mr. Jen?
No items, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Bukovac?
Technology Committee has no items, please cancel.
Thank you. Police and fire, Mr. Van Turen?
Cancel, please.
Thank you. Annexation, Mr. Bukovac?
We have no items, please cancel.
Thank you. That completes item 10. Move on to item 11, reports of administration.
Mr. Kukuka?
I want to thank council for your expeditious approvals of all the salaries. Mr. Plus will be very happy. All the rates have been entered, and we are running a special payroll for the retro for everybody going back to January. So those will be ready tomorrow. They'll actually be hard checks for all those employees. And the report.
Mr. Picard?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Costello?
I'd also like to thank council for passing the first 2 items. That way I can get on with bidding out the street program and buying the truck that we need. And talking about the street sweeping program, just remind everybody, please don't mow your grass clippings out into the street so we don't have to sweep them up. And the waste transfer station out on the other side of the turnpike is open on Wednesdays and Saturdays to take your yard waste. Thank you. And report.
Just one item, next Monday night, we will be discussing the upgrade of our electrical system. It's an expensive proposition. We're estimating not quite $1.8 million. Mr. Courtney will be here to discuss the finances, to make assure council that we're comfortable with what we're gonna spend. And also we will have someone from the electric department here to, if you have any questions regarding the program itself. Graham Engineering does not do electrical engineering. So we had to send out, we didn't have to, but I sent out RFQs, which are statement of qualifications from different engineers. And we chose an engineer, and I believe we'll have, I also attached to your council agenda request a statement of qualification of the engineer I'm recommending we're hiring for this project. So we'll be able to discuss the program, the scope of work, and the financial considerations, and any questions you might have regarding exactly what we're doing to the system. So that's be next Monday at 7 o'clock. End of report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Just have a quick question, a couple questions actually. Mr. Costello, with that street program, just put that one out. Is the street, it's 8 o'clock soon, right? The idea is this: we have some new builds going up, one particularly in Ward 2, and the streets are filthy. Is that something that you will hold the builder to, or do you?
That's something you should talk to the building inspector about. He'll be taking care of that through the contractor.
So if we find that the streets are starting to get filthy in a newer development, just go ahead and contact contractor or anything that we see, if any neighbors see amiss.
Yes.
Thank you, and I appreciate that program. I think it's been went well the last couple of years. The second thing I had is I want to thank the mayor. You had a question, Mr. Winarski, about how do we handle potholes and things of that nature, and I know that every time I bring these type of issues, whether it be potholes or anything else, to the mayor, once again, he's blown me away with his ability to quickly respond and get right on it, and I'm always very, very proud of that. So, and I thank you for the last issue I brought to you and how quickly you responded. So, once again, kudos and thanks for your quick response. That is all, and with that, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as read.
Thank you. Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion and second on the floor, reports to administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Reports are accepted. Mr. Goodell?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Jan?
Second.
Motion and second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at 7:57.
Our town, our TV. Amherst City Cable.